Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Tara and I make videos about digital planning and different ways that you can get creative with your iPad. So if that sounds like something that's of interest to you, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you never miss a video. Let's go ahead and jump into the purpose of today's video. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm so excited to finally be able to bring you guys some different styles of videos other than just my plan with me's. So today we're going to be working in Procreate. If you have Procreate, you can go ahead and download the files that I have saved for this particular tutorial. So you can do that. I'll leave a link down below in the description and then you can just follow those and install. So what I have available to you is a color palette for what we're going to use today, and also you can feel free to download the brush that we're going to create. And if you want to just download that brush, then you can skip the brush tutorial portion of this, or you can just skip the downloading of the brush and make the brush with me today. So the first thing we're going to start off with in today's video is we're going to make a fun leaf brush that we can use, and then after that we're going to make some basic art with it. Looking forward to showing that to you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. Once you open up your Procreate app, you're going to want to open a new document. We are going to tap the plus sign here and we're going to create a new file size. So you can tap this icon here in the top right corner, and this is going to allow us to make a custom canvas. The first thing that we want to do is make it 3000 pixels by 3000 pixels, and then it needs to be at least 300 dpi. That's what I always work in. And for me and my iPad, this gives 70 layers. We're really only going to use like 5 or 6 today. So as long as you have that many available, you're going to be totally fine. The other thing that I want you guys to check is your color profile, especially if you're downloading specifically the color palette that I'm using today. If you're not downloading it, you can feel free to do whatever you want, but the palette that I'm going to be giving to you guys to download is the display P3 profile. You can check that setting, and as long as everything else is good, we're just going to go ahead and tap create. We do want to be working in a black canvas. So what we're going to do is tap our layers menu here, come to the background color, and then you can drag this all the way down. But if you want to make sure it's a pure black, you can double tap in the black area of the color wheel and it will automatically make it a pure black. But if you would like to double check that, you can tap on the value menu here. And as long as the hex code says all zeros, then you're in good shape. So we want a black background for this. And when you're making a brush in Procreate, you always want the background to be black and then whatever the base for the brush is to be white. So the white part is what you're going to see when you actually use the brush. If you've never made a brush before, that's probably counterintuitive to what you might think, but that's the way that it works. Now that we have our black background, we can tap done here. And in this layer, we want to make sure that we're working in pure white. I have a custom folder here so you can actually see this is the brush that we're going to be making. And what we're going to do is first we are going to come down to our calligraphy folder. So find that, and then you're going to find a monoline brush in here. So you can just tap monoline here. And then we want to change our color by tapping on here. Let's come to our disc, and similarly to how we got pure black by tapping down here in the black area, you can do the same to get pure white. So you can double tap up here and it's going to make it pure white. If you want to double check that, you can check the values and it should be all Fs. Okay, so now that everything is perfectly set up and ready to go, what we're gonna do is first draw the base for our leaf that we're gonna make. Let's see the size. This size is too big, so we're going to undo that. I just tap with 2 fingers, but there's also the undo button down here. And so you can decrease the size. Let's try 22 and see how that works. Still too big, I think. So this is now at 14. And I think that that'll work for me. And I'm just gonna draw this sort of like arched line for the most part. Doesn't have to be like perfect, you don't have to hold it or let it snap, but just kind of make a curve. And then what we're gonna do is just draw sort of like the veins. So you just want straight lines coming out of here. If you don't like the way that your brush is behaving, so like this is not the monoline brush that I usually use. If you're not loving it and you're new to Procreate, you might not be familiar with some of the brush settings. So we can actually go in and we can adjust the base settings here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up my brush library. And this is a little pro tip. You can do this for any of the brushes you have. I prefer to duplicate them just so that that I'm not like editing the original brush. So you can swipe to the left and tap duplicate, and then you'll get this little Procreate symbol. This makes this like a duplicated brush one that you're gonna edit. So tap on that. Well, that's just how you know which one was like native and which one's the one that you've added. And what we're gonna do is we're just going to adjust the streamlining. So in order to do that, we're gonna come to stabilization, and you can move the streamlining up a little bit, and you can also adjust the stabilization amount. I like to keep it somewhere under 25. I think if you put it up too high, it can affect the usability of the brush. I'm not a huge fan of having high stabilization, but the streamline works pretty well having it high. So let's put that around 78 and our stabilization around 18. And you might find that by doing that, you just have a lot smoother experience when drawing on the iPad. So I highly encourage you, no matter what brush you're using in Procreate, find what feels good for you by adjusting those settings. Let's try this again. Draw our little arch here, and then we're just going to draw like a V that comes off, kind of looks like a snowman arm, and then we're gonna draw another one similarly. So now the next thing we're gonna do is create a second layer, and I'm just gonna do that by pressing the plus button here, and I'm gonna drag it underneath. Now that it's underneath, we're going to draw the shape of the leaf by just kind of drawing around the outside here. So this has given us a skeleton for our leaf. And then once you're satisfied with that, you can fill it in. Drag from the color up here in the corner and then fill it in. And then what we're gonna do is come to our layer that has the leaf veins. And we're gonna take 2 fingers and swipe to the right. And that's going to alpha lock this layer. And in order to check and make sure that's the case, you can see that there's like a checkered background behind it. If you can't see that or it doesn't seem to be working, you can tap and then just tap on the alpha lock setting there. Okay, there'll be a check mark next to it. And now we can come to our colors, and let's just make this a gray. So I've got it at 77%, so that makes this C4, C4, C4 is the hex code. Gonna come back to our layers and tap on this one, and then tap fill layer. So it's gonna fill that white space now with gray. So now the whitest part of our brush, or the purest in color in our brush, is gonna be the white part of our leaf. And then we'll notice a little bit of opacity. It'll look a little bit darker where the gray is here. In order to make our brush, what we need to do is take 3 fingers and swipe down, and you're going to hit copy all. When we copy this is what we're going to use for the shape of our brush. So we can come to our brush library, and now if you, on the left side, drag this until you see this plus sign, you can tap the blue plus sign and you can give it a name. So like custom brushes or anything that you want to name it for the personal ones that you make. And then we'll tap the plus sign here. And from the basic brush, the first thing we're going to do is come to our shape. And now we want to tap edit here and import. And then we want to paste the shape that we just designed. So we're going to tap paste. And you can now tap onto here and make sure you tap done, and it's going to save that as the shape. Now this is going to give you a live preview of your brush. It doesn't really look like much here. We need to go change some other settings. So let's come to our stroke path, and we really want to increase the spacing here so that it's still a stamp brush, but also so that we can use it kind of smoothly if we feel like it. So I'm gonna put this at 67. And then I want it also to jitter a little bit so you can see with these settings what that does. I don't want it to be too far and sort of too out of control, but basically if you have the jitter really high and I press here, there's not really a guarantee that it's going to be like directly where my brush is. It jitters away from the line where you're actually drawing. So I like to keep it just enough. It adds a little bit of fun to it, but it's not so unpredictable. I'm going to put this at like 12. And then stabilization, we don't need to change anything here. And then let's just check here with our shape. So we want to scatter a little bit. We also want to rotate a little bit. For the rotation, let's make this 36, 37. And then the scatter, I'm gonna move this all the way up to 136. So now when we draw with it, it kind of changes direction a bit. And then we're going to come to our grain. And you don't have to do this is optional, but it's definitely fun, I think, in my opinion. So we're just going to tap edit here. I always like to add a little bit more texture to my digital artwork. I'm gonna tap import, and I'm just gonna use something that's built in already to Procreate. So we're gonna tap source library, and we're just gonna find a texture that we like. So I'm thinking bonobo. So I think this might be a little bit too intense. So what I'm gonna do is invert it. We're just going to take 2 fingers and tap on the screen. Now our texture is gonna be more filled in with just like a little bit of speckles. Whereas if we did it this way, it would be less filled in with a lot of speckles. So you can see the difference there. We're gonna do it this way. Make sure to tap done before switching to a different menu here. One thing that I also want to do here is you can adjust the scale of that, and you can see it actively here. I want it a little bit lower. I'm thinking maybe like 17. I also am gonna take the depth down a little bit, so kind of in the middle. Let's do about 43. So the next thing we're gonna do is in rendering, we're just going to quickly change this to light glaze, and then we're gonna come down to our color dynamics. And to me, this is where the fun really starts to happen. In order to make it so that when you play with the brush, the color adjusts, I want you to first come here where it says drawing pad and change this color so you can actively see what's going on. This is all pink, but you can adjust the hue. So if you have it up high, it's going to mean there's more shifts to the hue in each of the particular leaves within your brush stroke. And you can adjust the saturation that way too. So you'll find some are more vibrant and some have far less saturation. You can adjust the lightness and the darkness. And there's a lot you can play with. We're gonna bring our darkness and our lightness and our saturation and our hue all the way down. I just wanna adjust the stamp color here. So we're just going to, I'm thinking only like 8%. We actually don't need it super high, 8 or 9%. Saturation, I'm gonna leave by itself, just not gonna do anything there, but I am gonna adjust the darkness a bit. So let's bring that up to 17 or maybe 18%. And then the rest of this we can leave. We don't need to change any of this. We'll come to dynamics. And for speed and size, I'm gonna up this 30 so that the size adjusts more faster your brush stroke. And then the jitter size, gonna change this one also to about the same. We're gonna do, I feel like 31%. And now I am gonna still change a setting at the end with the sizing, so this is gonna change in appearance a little bit. But let's come to our Apple Pencil here, and I also want the pressure to affect it, because for me, I really like the pressure sensitivity that the Apple Pencil offers. I will take the size here and just up this to like 48%. It looks a little bit crazy right now, but if we come then to our properties, this is what's gonna change it. So I want the maximum size to be quite a lot bigger. I like for the brush to be able to be big, but I don't want it to be super small. So we're gonna bring the minimum size up to, I don't know, like 60, maybe 61%. And the maximum, I don't know, somewhere around 900, 916 works. For opacity, we want to keep that at max. And then for the minimum, I'm going to bring this up too because I don't want it to be too transparent. So let's make this like 70%. And then for the about this brush, you can change the name. You can give it a name. So you can change this to leaf brush. And then you can sign it. You can add your picture. You can do whatever you want to. And we're going to hit done. And now let's just test this out a little bit. So I'm gonna turn off these layers and I'm gonna change this background color just to like this gray. That's the last color in this color palette. And then let's just kind of see what it looks like. And we can make this smaller and you can kind of see the way this brush works. See if you like it. We can try it with some other colors as well. So we've got this darker brown color. You can see, and I personally like this amount of hue change. I think doing more than that feels a little bit unnatural, but it also just depends on what you're going for. We can also try this like orange color and see what that looks like. So you can just play around and test it out. If you feel like there's any settings that you want to go in and change, feel free. This should work for what we want to do for our project. So first, I'm just going to delete all of these layers. We don't need them anymore. And what we're gonna do is we're going to come to our text. So in order to add text, we want to take the wrench icon, and here in our actions menu where it says add, we can add text. We're just going to write the word fall. We can do it in all caps, and then we can press the little A here. This allows us to adjust the font. So we're going to change this to Avenir, and we're gonna also change it to black so that it's thicker, and let's increase the size here. So we want it to fill most of the page, and then we're gonna do something a little bit extra here. So first, let's triple tap on this and let's change the color. We want this to be in this yellow. And you can bring this a little more centered. And then what we're gonna do is in our layers menu, we're actually going to duplicate this layer. So we're just gonna swipe to the left and tap duplicate. And then we're going to edit this text, and we're going to open up that menu here, and we're going to tap where this outline is. And basically what this does is it gives an outline to the letter, but it actually doesn't have a fill. So I'm gonna press done here, and I'll show you. If I remove that bottom layer, it's just done an outline. But I really wanted a thicker look, and so in order to do that and kind of save myself from having to search for the perfect font, I just made this a little bit thicker and it fits my needs. What I like to do sometimes in the process is I will just duplicate this bottom layer and turn it off, just in case I want to go back and change something and edit it later on. I have a base to start with. It's not really necessary, but it's just like a little safety net. It's pretty easy to type the word fall. Anyway, what we're gonna do now is we're actually going to rasterize this text layer so it's not gonna be editable, and rasterize the layer on top. And we're going to merge these together. So I just took 2 fingers and pinch them together. Now, we also want to slide this to the left and duplicate it. And we're gonna come to the bottom fall layer. And just like we did before, we're gonna alpha lock this. So swipe with 2 fingers to the right until you see that checker background, or tap and turn the alpha lock setting on. And we're gonna turn this into that darker yellow, so the second color in the palette, and you can fill that layer. What we're gonna do now is we're going to move this layer to give it a bit more of a 3D look. So you can take your mouse here, the cursor, and what we're gonna do, just pull this just a little bit up and to the right. And then what we're gonna do is we need to turn off alpha lock setting. So you can, again, swipe with 2 fingers or tap on this menu and turn alpha lock off. So there are a couple ways to go about finishing this 3D experience. I'll show you my 2 favorite ways. The easiest thing for me to do firstly is to come to the top layer and just reduce this opacity a little bit, and this will give you a more precise view of what's going on underneath. You don't make as many mistakes, and then we'll bring it back to normal in a little bit. Let's come down to this bottom layer here, and we're just gonna add to it. If it makes you more comfortable, you can do it on a separate layer. The 2 ways to do it are we can take our brush library and we can come back to that calligraphy brush that we were using before, the monoline one. And this is the one that I adjusted the streamline and stabilization settings to. And you can just draw and hold. And if you need to edit that, you can edit the line and then just come back and you can fill in this space. It's okay that it looks silly here because you're not going to see that later once we bring the layer opacity back up. The other way that I like to do it, which I find to be pretty quick, is you can tap your selection tool here and we can do freehand and also color fill. And the way that this works is now you can just zoom in and tap these corners and it's a bit more precise. So then you can draw to fill the rest of that gap and then tap the gray spot there. And then you can just come down to this corner and we're gonna draw around and just make sure that gets filled. So even here we can see, so this is why the opacity helps, because if the front layer was fully opaque, then you wouldn't be able to see where this corner was and you would just kind of have to guess. Okay, so now we can deselect by tapping our little ribbon tool here. And like I said, let's go ahead and just bring the opacity of this layer back up to 100. And now we've got this sort of like perfect little block set of letters here. The next thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna play with our brush. So let's add a layer on top. If you want, you can group these together or you can merge them together so that they are all on one, or you can just leave them separate. It's totally up to you. I have nothing in this layer, so we can actually delete this one. And now is where we're gonna add our leaves. So the first thing I want to do is we're gonna use a clipping mask. Tap on layer 6 and tap clipping mask. Yours might be a different layer count. This layer that we put on top, we wanna make sure that it is a clipping mask. What a clipping mask does is anything that we create on this layer will be clipped to this layer here, meaning I can draw anything I want. So let's just take brown color here, the third color in our color palette, and I'll just draw like this and it stays within that layer. So that's what we want right now with our leaves. And we're basically going to use that fun leaf brush that we just made. Just make sure that's selected. And then we're just going to draw a bunch of leaves here. Now I am going to make it a little bit smaller again, and we're just going to put a few of these falling in other places in the lettering. And then we're gonna come to the outside. So we're gonna add another layer on top, and we don't want this one to be clipped, and we're going to start putting leaves down here at the base. So they're sort of collecting at the bottom of these letters. And then what I would also do is start to spread them out as well, like a little bit. So drag the brush, because even if they're all gathered in one spot, there's probably a few stray ones out here. And if you find one you don't like the color contrast or something, you can just erase it and tap again, because it will change. Remember, we had that jitter. And now we're gonna just do one last thing here. And that is we're going to take this layer here, actually all of this, and let's group it all together and duplicate it. And now with this bottom layer, we are going to first take our letters for fall and let's just merge them together. And then what we're gonna do is duplicate that layer and come to the back here and swipe to the right in order to alpha lock it. And let's take this same gray that's in the background and let's just fill this layer. Now let's turn off the alpha lock here. And now the other thing that I want us to do is we can delete this leaf layer and take this one and also duplicate that one as well. And we're going to swipe to the right and fill this one as well. And let's just bring this one down. So I've just kept these here just in case, but I probably will end up deleting these, but I just like to have a backup just in case. Now we've got these two, they're done. We can un-alpha lock both of them and merge them both together. I know they're really hard to see at this point, but what we're gonna do is take this N here and tap on it, and we're gonna change this layer. It was in normal, now we're gonna change it to multiply as the blend mode. And you're gonna take your selection tool here, take your transform tool here, and we're just going to move this and drag it down. And you can see we've now given it a shadow, but we also want to blur it a bit. So we're gonna come to our adjustments menu here, and we're going to tap Gaussian blur. And we're just going to drag this up maybe to like 11 or 12%. And then tap the M again, and we're just gonna bring that opacity down. It doesn't need to be super high up. But now everything has a shadow. So our leaves have a shadow, the block letters have a shadow, and it just gives a little bit of depth to our artwork. Okay, so now I am gonna go ahead and delete these because they're not necessary. And you can choose to keep this in a group, or it doesn't really need to because it's all by itself now. So if you want to clean up your layers, you can, and you can delete that group, and we can rename this one as our shadow. And if you want to, again, keep everything super organized, you can rename these. But again, that's totally up to you. It's not really, this isn't a huge project, so it's not super disorganized or anything. But there you go. There you have it. A quick little tutorial and a way to make a fun brush that you can get creative with in the fall. It's a huge time saver in your artwork. You can just quickly add a bunch of leaves in a matter of seconds, and it varies the color already for you and just really simplifies the whole process. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this little tutorial, and let me know if you did, and if you'd like to see more simple artwork that you can do on your iPad. I will happily share all the little hacks that I know. Anyway, that is all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!